Hello everybody and welcome to the first live Green Events Innovations GEI Summer Series. I'm really happy today to be able to welcome a lot of excellent speakers on a topic it's actually been really high on the agenda for a long time, and that's in relation to plastic pollution, the production of plastic, the use of plastic, and how we deal with that plastic within the live events industry, the music industry, but also as a world, completely together as a society. So there's another problem that's arisen now, and that is in relation to what impacts will the pandemic have on our use of plastics. But conversely, with this huge change in many respects in all the systems that we live in, what opportunities are there that we really need to grasp in order to really tackle plastic pollution head on? So without further ado, I'd like to introduce each of our speakers very briefly, and then they're going to each give you information about what work they've been doing, and especially in relation to plastics and the events industry. So we have Patricia from Live Nation, we have James from StatCup, Melinda Watson from Raw Foundation, and Alex Brook from Peppermint Events, and Camille Guiteau from Bye Bye Plastics. So I'd like to start with Patricia, if I can. Can you briefly introduce yourself and also let us know what habit you have either developed or shaken during the lockdown?
Hi everyone. Thank you so much, Claire, for inviting me to this panel. I mean, this is a conversation that is needed to have. So my name is Patricia. I'm Head of Sustainability for Live Nation Europe, and I'm responsible for developing and implementing a sustainability program across Europe, and to work together with all the markets to implement or reach all the targets that Live Nation committed in their sustainability charter that was published exactly a year ago, in May 2019. And answering your question of something that this new situation has brought to my life, I guess cleaning all my grocery store, shopping when I get home, and being very, very aware of everything that I put into my house. And I always have the spray with bleach ready to clean all the surfaces and all my shopping and everything. I think that's been like the biggest thing for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. And James, over to you.
Hi, everyone. It's really lovely to be a part of the conversation today. I'm Managing Director of StatCup on a global basis. So we operate in roughly about 32 countries. And we run reusable cup programs. And we're obviously committed to removing single-use plastic and replacing it with reusable products. And so I guess we try and fit in with all the players and the parties that are involved in that process. And collaboration is a big word and something that we were about to achieve this year, but that's on hold for now. I guess the one thing that I've been doing, I guess more of is running, which is good news. Since we've been locked down, I've become a teacher seemingly. So I've got two kids. So I'm suddenly back to GCSE coursework, and I guess the other thing is I've turned to orange gin and tonic. So I'm drinking a bit more of that. So that's me.
Sipping on gin and juice, marvellous. Yeah. And Melinda, over to you. Oh, you're muted. 1 second. Sorry, Melinda, you were muted just then. Over to you again.
Can you hear me now, okay?
Yep, we got you loud and clear.
Great. Hi, Claire. Thank you so much for inviting me to this panel and to discuss this really important topic. My name's Melinda Watson. I'm founder of Raw Foundation and Raw Bottles, which is focusing on providing solutions to the plastic pollution crisis. And I've been working on plastic pollution for over 15 years now. So in education too. So how has this pandemic sort of shaken up my habits? I think it has forced us all to slow down, including myself, to really re-examine our work-life balance and to listen even more to what nature is telling us, and to focus on sort of envisaging, like, what is this new world that we want? Because nature is sending us a very clear message this time, that we can't afford to go back to business as usual.
Absolutely, that's a very fantastic point, and you can really listen to nature and feel it in your heart now, even audibly, genuinely. You can hear nature a lot more clearly in our cities. Let's hope it permeates into our behaviours. And over to you, Alex.
Hi there, I'm Alex Brooke. I'm one of the founders and directors of Peppermint Events. And as everyone else has said, it's great to be part of this panel. It's a subject that is certainly one that's very close to our heart, both from a learning perspective, but also from an operational perspective. We, I suppose, are part of the problem in a way, if you want to look at it like that. We operate music festival bars across the UK primarily, although we do a little bit of consultancy outside of the UK. And so we're heavily involved in the delivery of drinks and food in certain instances. Through that nature, we ultimately have been using a lot of single-use plastic and are really on a journey to try and alleviate ourselves of that problem and start to look at new solutions that are viable. I think we have a really great interest in learning about what true viability really means and how we can make true difference rather than greenwashing, which is a little bit of a pet hate of mine. But anyway, enough of that for now. My habits, good and bad, that have changed. I agree with a lot of the things that have been said in terms of, slowing down the pace of life, although I seem to have been incredibly busy for some reason over the last few weeks. I suppose just really having more time with family. I'm incredibly busy a lot of the time, so actually working from home, really engaging with the kids, although I have to say, massive respect to any teachers out there because you're all legends. I suppose from a personal point of view, I've had a bit of time to nail my wood-fired oven at home, so getting fatter by the minute with a few too many pizzas. But yeah, that's me for now.
Yeah, I think that we're all getting our winter plumage early, aren't we? But I think also you say that being the bars and events as a source of the problem, it can also be a very strong source of the solution because you really understand how it actually works on the ground and what doesn't work. So I think that it's a very pivotal position to be in. And Camille, over to you.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much, Claire, for the invitation. Really happy to be here today. So my name is Camille Guito. I'm based out of Amsterdam, and I have co-founded the Bye Bye Plastic Foundation with Blondish. So the project has been growing for 1.5 years and evolved into this foundation. We are set to eliminate single-use plastic in the music industry by 2025. And we do this through 2 pillar activities, which are directly linked to our core beliefs, which is knowledge is power and power is action. So we are here to craft and share knowledge and look and facilitate solutions on the grounds as well. And as to the habits shaking, I think, it's quite a nice mix between all that was said. Definitely getting to eat more and, have nicer wine time in the evening. And yeah, I've been extremely good at having an earlier schedule for the first week of the pandemic, and it quickly completely went back to later bird in the end.
Excellent. I've taken to making lots of various fermented products and trying to eat dandelions, much to the dismay of my housemates. But you got to experiment, you never know. And so what I'd like to talk about first really is I suppose the overarching picture of, well, why are we picking on poor old plastic, and is it actually bad? And to start that conversation, I'd like to go over to Mel, because you've done a lot of work in relation to actually mapping and physically going and seeing the impact of plastic on the planet. Can you give us a bit of insight to that, please?
Yes, it is everywhere, which is to try and keep this as short as possible, but it is contributing to climate change. Approximately 15%, which is huge. Single-use plastic in particular, which is now threatening all life. It's in our air, our soil, our water, and all living things. It's contaminating our precious water systems, it's passing up the food chain, and it's affecting human health. It's now infiltrating other cultures and encouraging, if you like, this throwaway consumer culture at an unprecedented rate now. So, if you look at what are the main problems, I think the key problem is, it's made from oil in the first place. And for example, to take a plastic bottle of water, you're using at least 15 litres of water. Take one plastic bottle of water holds 15 millilitres of water, which is ironic. So some of the latest research, Claire, is really interesting, because they've just estimated, if we're looking at the quantity, first of all, ocean microplastic. The Plymouth Marine Institute has just come out with new reports saying ocean microplastic pollution is at least double what we thought, which means approximately we've got 3,700 microplastic particles per cubic meter in the ocean. Which obviously is pretty staggering. It's about anywhere between sort of 50 and 125 trillion pieces in the ocean, let alone in our soil, etc., and air. This poses a risk to the marine food chain, which holds a pivotal part in maintaining the world's climate levels. And on top of that, so the University of Strathclyde has just found out that tiny, plastic fragments are in sea spray now. It's like the ocean's sending it back to us. And also sort of some world-renowned scientists have just come up with a consensus statement, which is really important, because they've absolutely attributed it to human health now. Approximately 12,000 chemicals are not tested in any way symbiotically even. And it has been shown that these are migrating from packaging into our food and drink, which is causing cancer, heart disease, problems with our immune system, reproduction systems, etc. And many of these chemicals have never even been tested for human health, or aren't even disclosed at all, which is of concern. We're not immune to this. We are part of this interconnected world, and therefore why we think we should be immune to it, I'm not quite sure. And what's been particularly interesting for me was, tracking plastic. I've tracked plastic from down through Africa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and around the whole of South America last year, and the Amazon. So I've seen firsthand what's happening, and it is shocking. The Amazon, for example, is stuffed full of it. The Amazon provides 20% of the world's fresh water. So it's of major concern, let alone the rainforest, etc. So everywhere I went, I found not only rivers of plastic. We stopped every 100 kilometres the whole way to track it and monitor it and everything. And not only were there rivers of plastic in the desert and open air burning in so many places, but also it's affecting, and I call it our sacred waters. It is affecting our lakes, our rivers, and our oceans as well. So the key thing that I wanted to discover was, whose mismanaged waste is this? Everybody bangs on about, oh, mismanaged waste in Africa and South America is absolutely terrible. Well, whose responsibility is this? Clearly visible in this tsunami of disposable plastic were the items and logos and images of the multinational consumer brands, who are insidiously, I think, promoting and perpetuating our modern throwaway culture now around the world. It is these brands, if you like, and their mass production that is driving overconsumption now across the world. And in turn, this is overwhelming communities in these far-flung places and our planet with pointless plastic pollution. They've got no way of dealing with it. So I found it deeply shocking, particularly in the Amazon, where people 10 years ago could swim in the river, could drink local water. They're having to resort to buying bottles of water now too, which is just absolutely crushing, I think. And they don't want it. The messages the whole way around was they don't want it, and worst of all, they've got no way of getting rid of it. So it is deeply disturbing. Meanwhile, the appalling practice of our waste trade between industrialized so-called developed nations and developing economies is exacerbating the situation disproportionately. So it's time to put the brakes on.
Thank you so much, Melinda. It's such an amazing but unfortunately harrowing story, and really drives the reality home of just how much waste is being produced needlessly. Client Earth have been working a lot on this and trying at the moment to stop, Client Earth are a charity of lawyers that represent the Earth. They've been trying to stop even more expansion of plastic production at the moment. It seems to be a plan B for the fossil fuel industries. Patricia, can you talk a little bit about, what did Live Nation put into their green charter in relation to plastics, and why? What is the issue from your perspective?
Yeah, and actually I realized that's something that you asked me at the beginning, to explain what's my relationship with plastic in this case, and I didn't say it. So in our charter, the sustainability charter that Live Nation published last year, so one of our targets is to eliminate the sale of single-use plastic by 2021, meaning that this year was going to be the last one in which we were going to use single-use plastic, and we were going also to pilot some initiatives in order to be, fully with no sale of single-use plastic for next year. So answering your question. So again, as I was saying, this is our target, and this is what we are working on. And despite the current situation, we are still working on that target. The target is there, and I'm working with all my teams on reaching them. Now, there is not one size fits all, meaning there is not one single policy. For example, we're going to use reusable cups, or we're going to use PLA. PLA, for those that are not familiar with the term, is bio-based plastic, meaning that is plastic that is not coming from fossil fuel. So yeah, it really depends on the region. It depends on the waste management system of the region. Some areas can deal with PLA, others cannot. So when I'm working with my teams on reaching this target, we have to study the market locally, regionally, and then decide the actions or the initiatives that we are going to take.
And how many venues and festivals are you working with around Europe? Like, what does that policy impact?
Well, I cannot give you exact numbers, but how does impact? Well, it does impact, of course, the way some of the festivals or some of the venues have been doing things. However, I have to say that many festivals and some venues have already been developing these initiatives even before the charter was published. Like, for example, in France, in our festivals in France, they were using reusable cups in 2012. So it's not that it's something new for everyone. I mean, for some, yes, it is, but for others, it's not. I mean, and in fact, one of the reasons why we published the charter is because there was already so much work being done on this issue that it made sense to have a unified vision for, you know, everyone working towards the same goal.
That's a really interesting point about bringing it all together. Of course, with Live Nation, you have so many different countries, outlets, etc. So to be able to unite all of those different actions is going to be very valuable to learn from mistakes and also to accelerate more quickly. Yes.
Sorry. And I wanted to say also that it's very important to create like best practices and learn from each other, and that's really important. However, again, going back to my point that I made earlier, one size doesn't fit all. We really need to look very closely at the waste management systems, the culture, even things like, for example, consumption rates, right? Like it's not this, like you are in a country where the consumption rate is really, really high, and the festival is very large. It's really difficult to, for example, use reusable cups because you don't have a space, or you don't have, maybe you don't have access to water, right? To clean and to, so that's why it's very important to look very closely to the idiosyncrasies of that region. You cannot just say, you know, this solution is the solution. That's not how it works.
Absolutely. And Camille, you've worked across a lot of different countries. You work internationally with Bye Bye Plastics at various venues. And can you tell us a bit about how that experience has been, with the advice that you're able to give, and also what you're recommending?
Yeah, for sure. So in that regard, I will absolutely equal Patricia in this. This is one of the first things we say to each stakeholders we have conversation with. There is no one size fit all solution. So depending on your specific context, local context, state of development, state of operation, we will we'll have to recommend different solutions. Also, innovations are on their way. When it comes to plastic alternatives, they're not necessarily available everywhere at scale. So we have to, so this is also the space to experiment and grow those solutions depending on their availabilities, their local availabilities. One very important, one very interesting observation that we've been seeing is, and we're looking to bring this conversation further wider across the industry. That's because this is extremely keystone for the industry and for us in the future in plastic reduction. That's when it comes to bring your own cups policies and water operations. The US has a pretty different cultural approach to the security and safety angle when it comes to bring your own cup policies at festivals, while in Europe this is something that's pretty much considered impossible for various reasons and various extents, be it legal compliance, culture once again, or perception. So I think it's very important to since bring your own cup policies or bring your own bottle policies are already are in place and have proven successful, it's important to bring on those stories and bring the success stories and the success points in order to grow together into those operations in the future. So that's something that Bye Bye Plastic will be pushing as a conversation much more in a very short future. So you can hold on to this. We're programming a few interesting panels in that regard in the coming month.
Great. And you touched on health and safety there, which we're going to come back to shortly and look at in quite some detail, I hope. But first, Alex, I mean, talking about all of these varied scenarios across different nations, you're really at the forefront in dealing with the bar operations on many different types of events. So what's the situation from your perspective in relation to the plethora of solutions?
I mean, I think it's relatively early days. I think, clearly there have been certain festivals that have really trailblazed this for quite some time, and obviously quite a lot of other events are very much trying to catch up and work out what are the best solutions. I think it's at least from our angle, and we're only one operator amongst quite a few in this space, but I think from our point of view, there are quite a lot of confused messages around the right solution. I think, being honest with you, I feel there's quite a lot of knee-jerk reactions. I think there's quite a lot of keeping up with the pack from a PR point of view, in terms of, oh, somebody's done something, so we've got to follow, we've got to go down that path because a competitor festival has done that, and therefore consumers will expect that. So I think as been mentioned in quite a few of the other comments that have been made, there is clearly not a one-size-fits-all, but more importantly, I don't think there's a very clear path to success at the moment across the UK festival scene. I don't think there's particularly strong understanding about actually how different potential solutions make a positive change. And that might be down to local issues to do with waste stream management. It may be to do with commercial challenges within the festival space, which work on very thin margins. So, there is a desire to kick the can down the road, pardon the pun, in terms of who pays for this. We all want to achieve the goals, but how we do it in a successful manner that truly makes an impact at the moment is not particularly clear. And I think there are some events and operators and suppliers doing some great things. I think in truth it's an issue that we all need to see as something that we battle together. I don't think that this is something that necessarily one person should necessarily do better than the other. I think it's something that we should all work together to understand the challenge, the truth behind the solution, and how those solutions genuinely make a difference. Because at the end of the day, this is not a some sort of badge of honor. This is a necessity. Just seen on the news the horrendous issues in the Nile, for example. Choking, more than choking, physically stopping flowing in places due to the amount of plastic, and it's clearly an issue that takes a lot of, it's like the oil tanker. It takes a long time to turn this industry around, and it's not about just who cares. It's about how you actually make those changes. And I think at the moment, whether it's promoters, whether it's operators or suppliers, there's a level of coming together, but we're quite some way off a clear path to success, I think is the way I would put it.
Some really excellent points, and I just want to bring James in, because you've been working with reusables for a long time, and so you've seen what those opportunities and obstacles maybe are. Can you tell us a bit about where you've seen successes and what the biggest challenges have been to implement reusables? Also, perhaps how much it's been implemented in recent years. Oh, sorry, let me unmute you.
Unmute. Yeah, we've got a large experience across both venues and festivals, and I think inevitably it's actually easier to work with venues because typically they have events going on week in, week out, and you can fine tune and learn as you go along, and you can improve, which makes it much easier than working in the context of one-off festivals where they need to make their money all in one go, and you just simply can't have things going wrong. Certainly not in the case of reusable cups where you're serving people drinks in large volumes. So I guess perhaps I could summarize that I think for us, and I'm sure everybody watching doesn't want to see companies take a backward step, but certainly the feeling is that be that venues or festivals, we're in danger of that happening. I guess from an experience point of view, there are 3 areas that we've been really focused on getting right, and it's there is certainly not one size fits all, and that is, I think, as Alex touched upon, there's the commercial model. So who's going to pay for these sustainable initiatives that you're actually introducing within a festival? Often it's down to the bar operator, as he said, they're working on thin margins, and that's a real challenge. But I think with leadership from the likes of Live Nation and some of the brewing companies, then I believe there was going to be a big step forward that happened this year that will be delayed till next. And I think one of those, for example, is the shared use of cups, for example, from one festival to another, where it's potentially unbranded and you can get maximum use out of that cup beyond perhaps the few uses that you might get in a festival, and so that's one area. I think logistics plays a big part in what we do, and again, I think, being honest, as an industry, we are still relatively new and relatively young. So I think we've been learning how to improve our logistics, working in partnership with both venues and festivals. And I think some of the pitfalls that we've come across is accountability around cups. Hygiene is certainly something that right now is very high on people's agenda right now. So we are trying to understand the facts. So I think there's lots of misinformation at the moment around why you shouldn't use reusables, and that's giving people an excuse to default to single-use plastic in the short term. Whereas actually, for example, so long as you capture those cups, they're not used more than once at that particular festival. They're taken away and washed properly. And it's easy to understand that from a scientific point of view. Plus, you can add additional measures. There's UV technology that you can apply at the end of the washing process that will ensure that 99.9% of bacteria and nasties are removed. But again, I think we're just at the point right now where we need to absolutely understand that from a scientific point of view to ensure that misinformation means that we don't default back to single use. And the other thing is working with government councils and leadership on the whole topic. Again, if I'm being brutally honest, I think there are some forms of authority of government that don't necessarily understand the challenges that happen in particular events. But having said that, I think so long as they stay firm in terms of some of the directives that are coming in. So obviously the EU said they've got a directive to ban single-use plastic. A good example is Scotland, who plan to put a levy of 20p on disposables, which means that potentially will force change and force people to look at alternatives. So that's something else we've been looking at. So one final point, I guess, of what I think good looks like, and perhaps I'll use a venue as an example of that, which is the SSE Wembley. So they took all the steps to start a reusable cup program. I think they were very nervous. They had to overcome lots of stakeholder challenges in terms of convincing people it was the right thing to do. There are health and safety concerns that needed to be addressed with the council, and now they're up and running with a fantastic program. But they also apply a £1 non-refundable charge to customers, and I think they're really concerned that there would be a backlash to that. but in actual fact, they donate any surplus to that profit to City to Sea, who I'm sure people know, but is a not-for-profit organisation that does some fantastic work around the area of sustainability. So, and as long as it's communicated properly to customers and logistically can be managed properly, then I think your quid's in. So I think also the capture of those cups for washing and the accountability around it has been key. To keeping them on site and making sure that people don't take those cups away. So I hope that is clear.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many good points there, and we'll dissect and come back to a few of those actually. And I think that the first one perhaps we'll come to is related to the cost. And Alex, you touched on this as well. So at the moment, in order to use single-use plastics, generally that's the cheapest option for most events. Would it be fair to say that in people's experience?
Yeah.
And so a lot of the costs clearly have been externalized to the environment, as Melinda was pointing out previously. There's a lot of waste, there's a lot of damage to people's land, to the air, to the water, which is what makes it very cheap. Those who are trying to do alternative solutions that don't have these externalized costs, therefore their hands are tied because our choices are very driven by economics. To any of the panelists, really, I'd just like to talk around this subject of what are the costs and what measures could we be taking in order to balance those costs so that we can make the choice based on economic reason as well as just a moral choice.
Well, one question I'd have just to start with, though, is that if you take a different look at that, which comes down to the decision you make around what the solution actually is what is actually the best solution? Because I think that some of the challenge comes back to this. You've got a plastic liner in a can, you've got a plastic liner in a wax, but in a paper cup. If you want to use it for hot drinks, cold drinks, different types of solutions, you've then got different types of liners that can be used or not used, and recycled and not recycled, and stripped and not stripped, and contaminate waste streams and so on. So therefore, the choice is not just about cost, it's actually about the benefit and the cost at the same time. And that's what we find so difficult to judge, is that if it was as simple as to say that one costs a penny, that costs 5p, and that one is absolutely bang on, and is the perfect solution to this, then fine, okay, cool, let's all get on the same page and work it out, because we know we're achieving this great goal of reducing this horrendous impact that the poor waste management of single use has. And then there's the whole concept around what is happening to that cup, and the challenge obviously is that some of the perceived perfect end solutions are still made from plastic, and so on and so forth. So it's sort of, we're clearly not talking about a perfect end outcome. It's more about what is the right middle ground solution, because cost is one factor, but actually sort of utilizing the product in the right way is as big a factor, to be, in my mind at least, to the decisions we make around what product we go with.
I think this is sorry, Melinda, you wanted to go as well, but I think that's very interesting what you were saying. But still, we need, when we're looking at those plastic-free or sustainable policies, we need to take things, zoom back from the conceptual grounds. So looking at not what are the solutions available, but what are the concepts, what are the goals that I'm trying to achieve. So in that regard, when it comes to plastic items and sustainability, you're going to quickly realize that on a sustainability point of view, reusable will always win over single use. Then it's about looking at, okay, what are the reusable items that are at my disposal at the moment that abide by my key concepts. Some of the key concepts that I think are very dear to our hearts at Bioplastic. And Patricia, I see you have this in the back of your screen over there, is circularity. This is really one key concept to help us get resources back into a loop that that will then in the end restore the balance that we're acting upon for the earth. And then comes afterwards comes the argument of the economic argument, the financial argument. Okay, are the solutions price competitive at the moment? If they're not, could they be? Could they be soon enough? Or could I adapt my operations, my strategy, my business in order to make it up? I think, but this is a conversation that each stakeholders and each business have to have, and I think there's what's going to be interesting for us is to think new ways, think out new ways to balance those costs and to just like show the creativity that we that is in our very DNA in the live event industry, apply this also in our financial and business model in that regard. How can I develop differently so that we actually build our models to last on the longer term financially as well? I think, I mean, that's what we're working towards, at least at Bioplastic.
Thank you. And Melinda, did you want to respond?
Yes, can I jump in? There were some really important points made there. You know, James and Alex and Camille, you know, about the cost. And if we're looking at sort of the externalized cost, so to speak, you know, the cost of clearing up a festival can be huge. And obviously it's different for different councils and different counties and different countries, etc. Yet, I think it's, as James touched upon this, I think it's really important that we don't, you know, we keep going with the progress we've made. You know, some examples of festivals that I've worked with, for example, Shambhala, that they've absolutely balanced those costs, if not saved them, so they've actually saved money. By deciding to go almost virtually, you know, plastic free. And Glastonbury, when we worked with them last year, you know, they decided no plastic bottles on site. So the cleanup costs were dramatically reduced. And then on top of that, we've got the whole contamination issue. You know, if we're looking at, I don't know, masks and gloves, there's been a report out recently from UCL, the Plastic Waste Innovation Hub, that reusable masks and gloves, etc., outperform most single-use masks, and mainly because they're classified as contaminated waste, and we, as we know, that you know, we're beginning to see piles of litter all over the country of these masks, etc., etc. And let alone the cups and the bottles, etc. To some degree, they will be contaminated, unless it's your own reusable one, in which case I'd certainly far rather use my own bottle. I know where it's been, etc. So the problem is with PP, any sort of PP or contaminated waste, is that that's okay in a hospital environment where it can be incinerated, which is not great, but it's better than nothing. But at the moment, this will there's no general system for the public, and it will contaminate the waste stream. And in fact, there is no system in place to deal with it. That's the problem. So I do really. We've been sending out a lot of messaging about the safety of reusables. It is still a safer and better option that still outperforms single use in any way.
And you've brought on, go on, Patricia.
Hi. Yeah, I would like to touch upon some things that both Camille and Mel have discussed, which I think are really, really important. And what Camille was saying is really to focus on what's the end goal, right? And then we will find different solutions to get there. and again, like for example, circular economy. So I think, and this is going back to what Mel was saying at the very beginning of the panel, one of the main problems with plastic is the misuse that we're doing with this material. We are abusing this material. It's just losing the value that it has, and it has a lot of value. I mean, it's an incredible material. It is. And in some cases, we've done some LCAs, and it can be, in some cases, I want to specify this, can be even more sustainable than other materials because it's very light. So then you can reduce your emissions. So, when you ship it. So we have to, I think, to go back to really think about plastic as a material that is valuable, and stop misusing it, because if we abuse it, it is when it ends us in the oceans, is when it ends us in our rivers, polluting everything. So I think we really need to take a step back and really think about what it is that we want to solve, right? Instead of what are the solutions. Well, but first we need to pinpoint what's the problem, right? So that's why, again, it's been said before. I mean, one size doesn't fit all, but if we really step back and think of what's the real problem, and I think the real problem is the abuse of plastic. It's as simple as that. So then we need to start rethinking or bringing back value to this material that it has so many great qualities, and instead of just designing it to be wasted, I mean, to use it for 5 minutes. I mean, you're using so many resources to create plastic and to ship it and to bring it to the festivals and to the venues, to just use it for, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It's just, it doesn't make any sense.
If I could just pick up on that, Claire. I think what's quite interesting is what Patricia is referring to is all around behaviour, and I think that we collectively as an industry can say at a festival we can create the perfect environment to create a perfect environment for reusables and capture those reusables, but it all comes down to making sure that customers behave in the right way. And so a question that I'd be asking is how can we make sure that the customers that turn up to these festivals in large quantities and often talk a good game, particularly if you look at the youngsters coming through now who are very environmentally conscious, but then at the end of the day, after a few drinks, they might just discard things and think that's okay. So the question also comes down to is how can we change behaviour? So because that's the whole point of reusables, which is if we can get it right and we can capture and take those cups back and wash them, then there's no reason why they shouldn't stay within a circular environment. But unfortunately, the bad behaviour is often amongst customers.
Yeah.
Oh,
Can I jump in there?
Oh,
yeah, go ahead, Melinda. Mute.
sorry. We're just trying to unmute you, Mel. 1 second.
That's a really important point.
We missed
James.
it because you're on mute, so go ahead.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's a really important point, James, because the behaviour is crucial. And what we found at Shambhala was really interesting. Once we started cutting out all of these single-use plastics and we focused on reuse and bar cup deposits and all of that sort of thing, that rippled not only into people taking that awareness home with them, but also, for example, last year only 2, which is a major issue with festivals, only 2 tents were left behind. And those 2 tents were neatly folded up and stacked up and left by the recycling place. So we've seen a real progression in change of behaviour. Once that reusable system starts, that continues into other areas. And I think it's really important here to dispel this myth about recycling. Anything, plastic or not, that is single use only is a ridiculous waste of energy, resources, everything. you know, so I think it is imperative that we stick to the sort of reuse model, and to dispel this recycling myth that the plastic industry are really trying to push at the moment to take advantage of this pandemic, is that you know, we approximately produce globally 400 million metric tons of plastic. The vast majority of that is ending up in landfills or the environment. And of all the plastic ever made since 1950, all of it, only 9% has been recycled. And of that, only 2% has been recycled bottle to bottle. So the recycling alone is never going to work. So we've got to absolutely move beyond that and keep focusing on reuse. It is the biggest myth on the planet, let alone all the offshoring of all of this waste.
So what have been, I mean, what are some of the biggest obstacles? Oh, sorry, Patricia, go ahead.
Okay, I would like to differ a little bit with Melinda, as much as I love everything that she's saying, and it's so important. But going back to this point that reusables are the solutions, again, it's not always the right solution. And again, I want to step back, and for me, what's most important is not about you know, reusable versus single use. It's about the material itself. As I was saying, reusable cups in some instances can be very problematic and have a negative impact on the environment. For example, as I was saying, if you are in a festival that it has a really high consumption rate, then you need, I mean, we've done the calculations, and in some cases, you need like 1 million reusable cups on site, and then you have to wash them and dry them. So the amount of energy, water that you need to you know, to keep the flow going, it's unsustainable. So there are other solutions. And again, for me, it's going back to this circular economy and to keep the value of that plastic and not throwing it away or even recycle, because I agree with you, Mel. I mean, the recycling system right now is completely broken. I mean, people don't know. People think that they put the, you know, the plastic to the recycling bin and it's being recycled, but that's not the case. I mean, oftentimes, if there is not an economic incentive for the waste management to recycle that plastic, because you know, no one is going to buy that plastic, then it's a problem. So that's why I think what is really important is to think of ways in which we can keep that plastic in the system, so it doesn't have to end up in the, you know, in the rivers. It doesn't have to pollute our land. It doesn't have to be incinerated and pollute our air. You know, there are other solutions, because again, in some countries we have legislation that we need to use single-use plastic. Well, there are solutions. You can collect that plastic at the end of the festival or of the event, and then find suppliers that with that same plastic produce or design the same cups for the next year, and then we buy them for them. So, you know, I mean, reusable cups are amazing, and reusable in general. I mean, no cups, it can be really anything, but sometimes, you know, it's not the most sustainable solution. So I think, again, you have to look closely at where you are addressing that problem, and the, you know, the other alternatives, or again, going back to what's really the goal for you. Yeah, I just wanted to say that.
I mean, I think.
Sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead. I think, Alex, I mean, Patricia, that's a really important point, because we have to absolutely take into account the whole footprint of these products. You know, the energy to transport it, the weight of it, etc., etc. Now, with some products that the plastic could work better. For example, plastic bottles, it doesn't. You know, you've only got to replace this with a plastic bottle and use this approximately on average 167 times, and it outweighs all the embodied energy and CO2 emissions and all the rest of it. It pretty soon, you know, starts outperforming. But with some products, I completely agree with you. Now, the only problem I have, Patricia, is that plastic can only be, when it goes to, obviously, if it ends up having to go to recycling, the market has dropped through the floor with regards to recycled plastics. And obviously, most of it, you can only recycle two or three times maximum before it downgrades, and you have to add virgin plastic to it, etc. So, and I still have a problem actually with some of the toxins involved. It's really simple. You put a toxin into a product, it will have to come out somewhere. So, having said all of that, I certainly know. Sorry to go back to Shambhala again, but they've been, and actually James, your Stacker Cup. If you can get washing facilities as low impact as possible and energy efficient as possible, then the reuse of those is a feasible solution, I think.
Alex, did you want to comment on that point?
Yeah, I suppose there's a couple of different things. First of all, there's a couple of just comments in the going on about deposit systems and so forth. And I think long story short, we found that they do work well. I think the challenge that we find is about the cost of this deposit, and there's another question here about if you make the deposit high enough, but at the same time, if you make that, that can become quite a massive tax to people in terms of, I left my cup in the tent, and now my next drink just cost me a tenner. Again, sort of, there are no easy wins, but I think at the end of the day, having deposits on things definitely helps us funnel the waste into more manageable waste streams, which definitely helps reduce the clear up costs and ensures sort of cleaner waste streams. So I know that's one of the biggest problems in our sector, is this sort of contaminated waste. It's fascinating to hear about the clarity around the sort of the necessity to drive away from recycling and more towards single use, because certainly that's that is a really interesting point. And I think for us, I think when you work at scale, reusability does become challenging. And I think the concept of bringing your own vessel to an event, and this is relevant because of where we are today in the world, with COVID-19 being around and being in the forefront of everybody's minds, it poses yet another challenge in the minefield of how do you service 70,000 people at once in a manageable way. Forget the cost, just in an operationally manageable way. But secondary, when it comes to water points, when it comes to refilling cups in bars. I noticed a comment here about let's just remove all the cups from the bar. I'd love to do that. I'd absolutely love to do that. But I'm also not willing to take the risk that I'm spreading every disease under the sun every time I take your cup and I put it under this tap, and I pull the tap and I refill it and I hand it back to you, and you've just got whatever the last guy had. These are the challenges I face. I'm coming at this from a different angle. I suppose I'm coming at this from the really boring operator angle, who sounds really negative about, oh yeah, well, here's a problem to every solution. Well, I don't have a problem to every solution, but I certainly am bamboozled by the solution some days, right? I'm bamboozled by the necessity to deliver people fair price, which is coming up to this conversation around deposits and so forth. Clearly we make something expensive enough, people take notice, and I get that. And it's not a massive conversation piece, to be frank. There's clearly a sweet spot which is deemed to be acceptable today because it's on point to do it. The question about what that is acceptable in a year or two's time, when it becomes normality and people start to go, hang on a minute, this is really expensive. I feel good about myself, but wow, that's pain, and this is again a COVID-19 issue of we're about to be in or are already in the biggest recession of within 100 years. There's no two ways about it. How quickly we come out is another matter, but where we are right now today is in an enormous amount of financial pain, whatever you do. Unless maybe you're a pharmaceutical company, you're quite happy. But the other side to the coin is how we take this solution, we make it viable in an operational sense, because that's all. At the end of the day, people's this is going to be part of a solution, is what I'm trying to say. And so, the idea of refilling people's cups, in a bar, as the technology stands today, is not viable to do at scale. So there are solutions for local level, there are solutions for small scale, which are relatively easy to implement. The minute you walk into a stadium environment or a large format environment, the solution is exacerbated 100 times because the economies of scale also become so out of kilter. And so it's not a question that needs answering, it's more of a sort of challenge that we face as an operator to take the great advice and turn it into reality on the ground. And clearly things are moving fast, but there are some really nice ideas there that pose us some really big questions. How do we do that?
Could this be an opportunity of the extra time that we've been given? We do have a much more of a financial gaping cavern in the industry for sure, but we also have time to potentially address and look at systems and infrastructure. Do any of the panelists have experience of that, or visions of what we could be working on right now in order to deal with some of those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely, don't be wrong. I mean, I appreciate what I'm saying could arguably sound just negative, and that's not the intention at all. I think that it comes back to my sort of general feeling that it's such a big problem and such an exciting solution when we get it right. That clearly there's a massive motivation to use the time to change, and just because it sounds difficult doesn't mean there's not a solution. So yeah, in long story short, I definitely agree that now is the time to take what is a problem that could be used in a negative way to say, hey, well, it's easy for us now to not have to worry about this more expensive, environmentally sustainable solutions because we've got the get out of jail free card, right? Which I think a lot of people are making the fair point. It's very easy to see that happening for the next 18 months. And I think it'll be a lag rather than a change, a long-term change of heart, because I think the other side to the coin is that, people feel that we've possibly created this situation that we're in by the way that we treat our planet and the way we treat animals and the way that we treat our supply chain of food and all that sort of stuff. So I think there is a motivation to ensure that we change our ways, and now is the time to do that. It's just that just listening to what everyone's talking about, the solutions are so sort of difficult to see your way through to actually something that becomes something you can deliver, that it definitely feels like we all need to come together to understand the solution, because it's complex,
James, do you have, sorry Melinda, go ahead.
Just very quickly, I think, Alex, what's great and really positive is that we have got, case studies now of events that have upscaled to quite a large size to learn by. And as Claire said, we've got time to really think these systems through now. So, please do. We've got quite a lot of different case studies, and they're different for each organisation. But we've got lots to learn from and to build upon. So check out, our plastic-free festival and events guides, because there's quite a lot in there, and where things have been upscaled and are cost efficient.
Yeah, I think the bringing forward bringing more collective understanding is one key element, key understanding of where we were standing at before. And this is something that we have taken the opportunity to prioritize at Bye Bye Plastic during this lockdown period, because we realized that there's very little understanding of the general plastic footprint of the industry. So we took extensive research to create a baseline data for the industry so that we could start having this general ground base. I know, Claire, we've been discussing about this in several extents. And so and really the idea is having this conversation starter, having this collective understanding of what was yesterday's situation, so that we take the opportunity today to recreate the models, recreate the long-lasting and the sustainable models, sustainable in the three sense of sustainability, environmental, social, and financial. And in this financial part, I think that's important to bring those understandings. So across this whole timeline, to me the key is collaboration and knowledge sharing. I think it's very important to make sure we as event businesses, as organizations, share more data in order to create this collective understanding together, and foster further discussion, because be it on the environmental footprint or be it on the financial advantages or disadvantages of certain models, we need more insights, more data informations that are shared, so that we can have comparison elements, so that we can progress all together, really.
Absolutely. And we've got 10 minutes to go, so I wanted to just whip back around to the health discussion quickly, because there's kind of two factors here. We've talked a lot about cups, which is obviously just one part of the plastic problem of the industry, but it's one that we have a lot of expertise in already. There's an issue with health and safety with cups now, and something that with misinformation or lack of information could see a reversion to single use when it's not the best option. And then conversely, we also have the PPE issue, which was discussed earlier. And so from probably Live Nation and also Stat Cup, you'll have experienced this from the supplier of the plastic cups, and Alex as the bar. What are the PPE requirements that are coming in? Are you seeing already requirements on not using reusables? And what could the solutions or changes be going forwards? Alex, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the PPE, because we're operating outdoors quite a lot, I think the basic requirement's going to be a face mask and gloves for our staff, because the view is that the spread in the rate of infection outdoors is considerably lower than if we were working in a closed environment. So I think both sides, I think from the safety of the staff and the safety of the consumer, that's the understanding we have, is that we're very likely to require all front of house and staff members to wear those two items, which is going to produce quite a lot of waste if we were to go down the single-use route, because we employ a lot of people. Even in the new world of doing things in a slightly different way, there are still going to be quite a lot of staff out there serving you drinks in car parks or wherever it might be that you're watching your Luna Cinema or whatever it might be.
And Patricia, what is your experience with the PPE coming up?
Yeah, so again, I mean, this is a very new situation for everyone. So we're now working on it. And of course, because I'm responsible for all Europe, depending on where you are, in which market, the regulation is one or is the other. So right now we're just building up guidelines and protocols to deal with this. And I'm working together with health and safety departments to work on this and see in the case that we envision an increase in single-use plastic, how we can address it. Now, I would like to pinpoint something that I mean, I'm sure people is familiar with this, but from the World Health Organizations, in one of their latest advices or guidelines that they say is to be careful with, for example, disposable gloves, right? Because there was this sense of safety, but actually disposable gloves cannot be safe. It's always better to wash with water and soap the hands and regularly than to use gloves, because the gloves can be contaminated. You throw them to the garbage, is contaminated, and also it happens that sometimes the people that wearing gloves have the sense that they're safe and might be touching different things. So that was a very interesting piece of advice, and I recommend everyone that is working towards this to read it. I mean, it's free, it's online. You can download it. Even from the World Health Organization, their advice and they're careful with disposable things because they might not be as safe as we think they are.
We will share some resources at the end, but the World Health Organization is a really good, obviously, resource to go to for what these global recommendations are. One such being that with disposable masks, they were recommending that the general public do not all use the plastic medical grade disposable masks, partly because of the shortage then for the health services. But coming back to the actual health of the cups as well, because people are obviously using them. It's always been an issue for the bars, certainly with Alex, with using the cups that may be dirty for passing on infection. Single-use cups are still going to have saliva on them, as are reusable cups. It's either the waste teams who are dealing with it or the back of house bars. James, have you had any considerations in relation to this, or anybody here on the panel?
Yeah, well, yes, we've been asked that question quite a lot of times, actually, and in fact, I've written a paper on it. But so there's a couple of things. Firstly, is I think what people forget with reusables is that actually still within a venue, you get a cup, but that cup only gets used once and then it gets replaced. But this goes away for washing. So the key thing is not necessarily in the venue itself, because actually a cup should only ever be, whether it's single use or a reusable, even that reusable will only be used once before it goes to get washed. The key thing then becomes washing. But before I talk about the washing, the one thing I guess that we've been looking at in our business is how we fit in with the process of managing customers at a bar, because obviously hygiene is really critical, but you've got to think about the customer experience that you're still providing. You can't have a Sainsbury's-like queue where everybody's queuing 2 meters down, literally down the road and out the door. So we've been looking at how you get people in and out of a bar quickly, and obviously making sure, for example, in this case, you're not actually handling the cup, you're only handling the handle, and so forth. So that's obviously a benefit of our product, which we've been looking at. But then also we've been working with venues and festivals, but more venues at the moment. For example, the Oval being a really good one, where we had a conversation with Basis yesterday, was the additional measures that we can take at the point of washing to make sure we've got 100% certainty that there's no contamination. And obviously there is some use of PPE by the people who are doing the washing, but also, as I said, this UV technology that can be used as well. But then, of course, as it's a partnership, it's also about the venues themselves to actually try and address this problem and make sure that it's managed appropriately with staff. So, I could go on, but those are just.
I mean, well, you've referred to a few other references there as well. And sorry, Melinda, go on. You want to make a point?
Yes. Can I ask James a question? James, how many sort of event goers hang on to your reusable cup for the duration? Do they have to only use it once and bring it back for washing, or what if they keep it, for themselves and just keep reusing it through the event? I mean, how many people do that?
No. So some people do take them home. I mean, that's slightly separate. But the reality is once you've used that cup and you go up to the bar, what will happen is you will hand that dirty cup over to the bar. That will be placed for washing, and you will be given a brand new fresh cup.
Right.
So
and what would the scenario be if I brought my own cup, or indeed wanted to hang on to the one that I've been using of your cups?
Well, the challenge around that is we don't know where your cup's been. So there are a number of issues relating to that, which is how I then serve you. So if, for example, I serve you a can and you pour something in yourself, then you could argue that that's acceptable. But actually, I'm not going to pour a pint and risk potentially contaminating the next person's drink with your cup that I don't know where it's been. So it's really important for venues to follow, you know, the protocol of swapping out a cup to ensure that it's not reused at that moment.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's helped clarify that.
We're rapidly running out of time, but I do want to get a few points in before the end. So just firstly on that, there is a survey at the moment with the Global Events Reusable Hygiene Project in order to gather some information together in relation to reusable cups and hygiene. So we'll share that later. And we're going to share all of the resources that we've referred to today. And for anybody who's watching, if you have resources that you want to include in that, research, guidance, etc., we'll pull it all together, and then anybody watching can, if they sign up to the Greener Festival mailing list, we'll distribute it, and we'll also put it into the comments here as well, so we've got that resource that can be live and we can keep adding to it. There's been a few really amazing points, like listening to nature for a start. Now that we are quiet, we can actually see that we're part of this interconnected web, and then taking that a bit more down to earth, although what's more down to earth than the earth, is looking at the true viability of all these options versus greenwashing, and that shared knowledge is really important for that. But also with the commerciality, is there a way that we can work out business models to share the costs and to make it viable, to make the best solution viable? And although we're a little bit over, I just want each person very quickly to say what you feel is the biggest opportunity for preventing plastic pollution or for the industry brought about by the pandemic, starting with Patricia.
Yeah, I would say the biggest opportunity is time to plan ahead and time to get together with people like here in this panel and share information and brainstorm. I mean, I think it's a great opportunity. I mean, this problem is not new, but now we really have the time to plan ahead and see what the options are, and again, step back and think about things that before we really didn't have time to discuss or reflect upon. So I think that's the biggest blessing, to say something, that the situation is giving us for the fight against plastic pollution.
Thank you. And James?
Yeah, so I'd say for me it's about collaboration. So both in terms of financial collaboration, sharing the cost of investing in these programs, but also sharing learnings across different countries. So that's where there's significant inconsistencies that we can really address.
This time I'm on mute. Melinda? You next.
Yes, I think this is a great opportunity, actually, because it's brought the importance of not only nature and the interconnectedness of all that, but it's brought the importance of the green economy to the fore. You know, everybody's talking about this and championing it, and indeed pushing this to politicians, etc. We can't afford to go back to business as usual. And as James said, the benefit of collaboration, we are all in this together, as everybody's been saying, you know, and I think the festival and events community, I refuse to call them industry. I think the festival community is incredible. You know, the capacity for not only creative change, but also to share that message and amplify that message is fantastic. We've got time to really think about that.
Absolutely, thank you. And Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I think I most probably echo the points that have been made there. I think time gives us the ability to understand the challenge more and understand the solution more, and bringing this to the front and centre through, I suppose, highlighting what can happen in the world when possibly we don't do things the right way. You know, we're going through most probably the biggest slap in the face, if you like, both in environmental but also health terms at this moment in time. So I would like to think that the reality check it enables us to really take a view. The time gives us the opportunity to actually come up with solutions, and the collaboration that is undeniably the foundation of success within this space. It very much is there for the taking, because we have the time, to see the benefits. The bluer skies, the lack of aeroplanes, the peace, the quiet, and all those things. I suppose really bring home the end result and the goal that's trying to be achieved. And so hopefully people take where the bad situation we're in now and see it for the benefits that can be there if we kind of work together, and understand, help each other understand what the most realistic solutions can be.
Thank you. And finally, Camille.
Yeah, so sorry that it won't be original, but I'm very glad to see that we all agree actually on this point. Absolutely agree with everyone. The opportunity is to understand better again what was yesterday's model. Like at the moment, this is the post moment, and this is why we have put a priority on the research and emulation of baseline data, getting understanding situation with numbers, with true insights, true inputs always takes time, and this is a resource. Time is a resource that's very scarce in the live music industry. So this is why it's so important, and we all agree so much. I'd like to point this Ipsos survey that's reflects 70 across the world. 71% of citizens have agreed that on the long term, climate change seems as a more serious issue than COVID-19. 71% in the world. This is a massive collective agreement. So now it is the time for the creative, the brainstorm, the debate, and the creative, the creation of new solutions, new models, new thinking path that will bring us to long-lasting and truly sustainable operating models. And for this, we do need better understanding, better knowledge, and therefore data. So we'll be, as you said, Claire, there will be all the useful links and resources will be listed. Hopefully this can be of great resource to many people, and equally surveys as well. We have launched a survey with regards to understanding of plastics in the music industry. So I encourage every event organizer, even professional, and also partygoers to go and take that survey to express opinions. That's important to have all opinions and really understand how we can build better tools in the future to track the progresses as well.
Thank you, Camille, and thank you so much to all of our panelists. I really appreciate it. And it's here in the UK and Europe, it's Friday evening now, so I might switch from my pint of water to something a bit more tasty. Thank you all so much. Please stay in touch. Let's keep the conversation going. And I'm very motivated, having heard all of your wonderful words. So thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Claire. Thanks, everyone. It was a really great conversation, and really looking forward to collaborate more and bring all the discussion points further together to make this future brighter and more solid and more sustainable.